Brushes are the most important tool in miniature painting. After all, which brush strokes you want to do and what your brush will be able to do decides how your miniature will look in the end. You can use broad strokes like when applying base coats or glazing, more confined lines when layering or painting texture. And sometimes we use the side of the brush, especially when edge highlighting, or the very tip when doing stippling or fine details. It's clear that a brush like this will probably work for layering, but you're going to have a bit of a hard time painting eyes with it just because the tip is already a bit gone. While this one will probably shine at it just because the tip is still in great shape. Opinions about what makes a good brush vary, and as always, what the best brush is a deeply personal thing. But I will tell you everything that I learned about brushes in the last 2 decades, and especially if you are a beginner, you will most definitely know what brush options you have at the end of this video. As always, what tool you should be using is going to be determined by your goal. The best example is dry brushing. You don't need a perfect tip for that. You'll use a bigger brush with stiffer bristles like this one. If you don't care about detail at all, you will not care about brush tips as much. The same if you only use contrast paints or washes and you never darkline, which is a more particular painting method. And if all you care about is speed and batch painting and getting things done, most likely you will never need an expensive brush. But when you care about having more control and want more options, maybe you gradually want to paint more details. That's when you might want to invest into some higher quality brushes. So you are an absolute beginner, you have no clue about brushes at all. There's so many different brands out there that each have dozens of ranges available. Which one should you get? Generally, what we use for miniature painting is a watercolor brush. We use the regular pointed version, forget about mobs or rigger or spotted or extended point and so on. I'm sure somewhere someone is producing masterpieces with one of these, but trust me, standard round pointed is what you're looking for. So if you decide to spend more time on painting, from my escapades with pigment pushing and from teaching thousands of mini painters, the most enjoyable experience is offered by natural hair brushes. But there's a place for synthetics, and we're also going to talk about that. One thing to keep in mind is this video is not a compendium or review of all the 250 available brush brands. It's meant to get you started with enough knowledge to make your own informed decisions. I'm going to put some affiliate links to the brushes that I mentioned down in the description. Keep in mind that sourcing these brushes from local stores or doing some research online will probably yield you some better prices, but if you want to support the channel, then that's a good way to do it. All you need to know is that there's a few factors that influence brush behavior, and that is the material and length of bristles, the shape of a brush, mainly how big the so-called belly is, and how well it retains the tip. So let's assume you want to use synthetic brushes, whether that's because they are the cheapest option available, or maybe you are new to painting and don't want to ruin expensive brushes right away. That's a perfectly valid strategy, and here's my breakdown. Rule number 1. Never ever get any of these. They are overpriced for no additional value. For the price, you can get a high-end Winsor & Newton synthetic brush designed to mimic high-end natural hair brushes. But instead, here you get the equivalent of a $3 brush for a huge markup just because it has Games Workshop printed on the handle. Just compare these two. They behave relatively similar. Both have the same snap. Both are already splitting a bit. The tips are not great. One of them costs $3 and the other one is more than $12. Synthetic brushes are recommended for use with acrylics because they're more durable and withstand the nature of the acrylic medium a lot better, as well as the exposure to solvents when cleaning them. But that's usually recommendations for canvas painting. In the harsh reality of miniature painting, synthetic brushes will lose their tip rather fast because the fibers that are used to create them are roughed up a lot more by every brush strokes than natural hair. They already start out with a brush tip that is not so ideal, simply because we can't quite copy how natural hair will still remain sturdy at the tip. So you can see the very tip of these brushes here can be deformed and pushed around. It looks almost separate from the rest of the hair. And another thing that natural hair has that we just can't replicate on artificial fibers yet is these tiny scales that natural hair has that help with moisture retention and how much paint you can put on a brush. These are things to keep in mind when purchasing synthetic brushes, but as always, something that doesn't work for one person is perfect for someone else. So try them and see if you enjoy them. The best synthetic brush I ever tried as far as the performance compared to how much you have to pay for it is the Saxo Optimum, where a size 1 sits at around $1 at the moment. So if you are from the US, grab a pack of these and try them, but you got to be prepared to throw these away once the tip goes. What has worked for me where I am are these Jack's School Series brushes. And they will illustrate perfectly what you get from a brush in this price range. They are the cheapest I can find at around $2 for a size 4, and they behave very similar to the Saxo Optimum. My favorite synthetic brushes, however, are the VINCI Nova series. They are a bit more expensive, but seem to have a higher quality bristle, as the ones I have not lost their tips yet, which is a bit of a surprise as I use them all the time to apply base colors and to do some initial wet blending. For me, synthetics are perfect for workhorse steps, applying base colors or initial blending, where I really want to work the paint into the mini and where a sharp tip isn't a necessity. You can somewhat do detail work until the tip curls at least, which is when I just throw them out usually. I will say, however, what makes synthetic brushes not work for me ultimately is how they retain and give off paint compared to sable brushes. They feel slick, almost as if the paint wants to come off again right after I picked it up. And I feel like I'm not in control as much when I apply brush strokes. With synthetics, we also do get these tips that make it almost impossible to paint really sharp lines. But of course, if you focus really hard and prepare the tip for 20 seconds on a night for the full moon, you might get one sharp line out of them. But if I can just spend $2 more and won't have to fight the brush, the decision is clear, for me at least. I believe tools should help you and not work against you, and you should not have to find ways to work around their shortcomings. Oh, and just one general thing, before you throw out your spent brushes, consider keeping some of them for the even rougher jobs like applying glue or base material, some messy texturing, or whenever you want to get paint on some areas that would otherwise damage your good brushes. Okay, I lied. There's one thing that is more important than brushes for miniature painting, and that is getting proper nutrition so your body can actually hold the brush the right way, which is not so easy if your day is very busy. And this is where Factor 75 comes in. With Factor, I don't have to plan what I could eat all week, I don't have to shop for groceries, and I also don't need to prepare every breakfast, lunch or dinner. I can just grab a healthy snack or heat a chef-prepared meal in 2 minutes so I can go right back to what I love to do. Factor supports your lifestyle and nutritional choices. You can choose your meals with a focus on protein, limit your calories, or even make every meal fit a ketogenic diet plan. Or you can mix and match and choose the best of everything from 34 plus meal options each week and 36 plus add-ons like smoothies, keto shakes or desserts. And as you can see, if you're using my link, you can grab a 50% discount on your first box, and that means you can get a meal for less than $6.50, which makes this offer an insane value and almost a no-brainer to try it. There's nothing to lose here. Why not grab a box full of great food for a massive discount? That means you'll get 50% off of your first Factor box and 20% off of your next month of orders if you are using my link in the description, or scanning the QR code means you can grab up to 5 boxes of Factor at a discount. Alright, at this point let's jump into more general things that will influence your choice of brushes. A lot of the usability of a brush hinges on the brush tip. We are working with fine details, and being able to paint thin lines or getting paint on an eyeball, for example, is not that easy if your brush doesn't keep a proper tip. A bigger brush that can retain a great tip is going to be the most versatile tool you can have, because it will be able to do everything. Layering, glazing, edge highlights, freehands, fine details, and at the same time you do not constantly have to dip it into paint, because the belly acts as a reservoir that feeds fresh paint into your tip, just like an old school pen, for example. What helps with that, and that is our next essential brush property, is the size of the belly. Synthetic hair for the longest time was not able to replicate natural hair that was wider at the base and thinner at the top. Very small sizes of brushes have that same problem. You can see this one just has a few short bristles, there's no visual belly, so paint retention is low and the paint in the brush dries out a lot faster. Which means you have to dip the brush into paint more often and you will have to clean out dried in color while painting more often too. Yet this is the weapon of choice for some people. It all depends on your style of painting and your preferences. Like if you want to paint with a lot of dots or lines, this is probably what you want to be using. And you'll just be okay with having to dip the brush into the paint a lot more. This kind of brush is my Swiss Army knife. It's versatile, and the reason why it can do anything is, as you can see, it retains a perfect tip, has a big belly, and it's natural hair. This is the best bang for your buck that you can get if you do the math, especially if you do care for it and clean it regularly. We're talking about a lifespan of at least a year of constant painting. On average, my brushes last me 2 years when I take care of them. This, by the way, is a Raphael 8404 size 1. And when I give a bunch of various brushes to mini painters to try them out, this is typically what people find the most versatile and what seems to be the most comfortable to paint with for the average painter. And everyone always asks me where they can buy one of these after a workshop, for example. So moving forward, whenever I talk about prices, this is the size of brush that I will be referring to for better comparison. Generally, you are looking for a size 1 or 2 brush, but between different brands and even different series of the same brand, brushes massively vary in actual size. Even if 2 brushes are labeled as size 1, they might not be the actual same size, keep that in mind. To illustrate that, my DaVinci Miniature Maestro size 4 is about as big as my Raphael 8404 size 1. If you decide to move up from synthetic brushes into natural hair brushes, you might be lost about what to buy and what to even look for other than prices. So here, next up, I'll give you a rough guideline to understand what your money will buy. Almost all the natural hair brushes we use for mini painting are made from some type of martingale hair because they're tapered and are perfect to create the brush shapes and those fine tips that we want. You can see that there is a lot of different hair options available, which can be confusing, but from worst to best quality for our needs, these brushes are made of either a mix of sable and ox or some other lower suitable hair. And speaking about mixed hair brushes, you can also get sable blends that are mixed with synthetic hair for about $3 to $6. But how do they compare to synthetic brushes? And one thing I mentioned is the better paint retention of natural hair, so that factor will be improved. And another good thing about these is that the natural hair part will hold a proper tip, at least at first, so even if they eventually lose it, this is a big improvement from pure synthetics, especially if you want to do detail work. Then you have black sable brushes, which use hair from the actual animal that we call sable. Black sable brushes are used for oil painting though, and not watercolor usually, so that's not really a buying recommendation for me. Pure red sable brushes usually cost around $6 to $12. And high quality red sable is a very good alternative to the even more expensive Kolinsky brushes. Just be aware that you are getting what you pay for here, and cheap ones will also have diminished properties, usually because the hairs are sourced from animals that live in warmer climates, so they are not as stiff. The bristles might not be as durable as Kolinsky brushes, but you will get some good mileage out of their tip as well. ROSEMARY Co is a good example for a brand that stocks series in this price range and hair composition. And at the top sits the Kolinsky sable hair, which is actually a weasel, not a sable, but still belongs to the Martin family and is the highest quality of hair that we can get. And all of these high-end expensive brushes usually are made from these hairs. They do cost from 12 to 22 bucks, which is nothing to sneeze at. But in my opinion, if you enjoy painting and want to seriously make it part of your hobby for a long time, you want to at least own one of these, just so that you can have a benchmark of what brushes can do when you are comparing them to cheaper alternatives. Winsor & Newton used to be the go-to brand in this segment for a long time, but their quality has gone down a lot in the last years to a point where they can't be recommended anymore with a straight face. DaVinci Maestro Series 10 and 35 are at the lower end of these price ranges and pretty good. The same for ROSEMARY 32, 22 and 8 series. ESCODA has a wide range of Kolinsky sable brushes in all price ranges, and at the higher end sits my favorite brush, the Raphael 8404. Usually I use a size 1 or 2, And even after using this one for a year, the tip is still amazing, no hair has fallen out, just absolutely worth it besides the price point. I want to give a shout out to VINCI. They have been trying to make an effort to produce brushes for miniature painters. And their miniature MAESTRO Series 76 range is right up there. I've been using this one for 6 months now and it is still in great shape. I learned to paint with bad brushes and that had its merits. But once I upgraded to these higher quality brushes, I just wished I always started with these, just because they make your life so much easier. You simply do what you want them to do and you do not have to fight them or work around them. So apart from the price point, there's actually no downside to these brushes. Not only are they super fun and convenient to use, especially when you take care of them, quality brushes will also last you a long time, which makes the investment not so bad in the end. Fun fact, by the way, brush companies explicitly state that these natural hair brushes last longer when used with actual watercolor because of the fact that acrylics, once dry, remain dry and cannot be reactivated. And that's what does the most damage to our brushes as miniature painters. So a good idea is to thoroughly clean your brushes now and then, and especially right after painting. Brush soap is enough to clean and sustain brushes if you do it each time after use, but if you need to thoroughly clean them, here's what I do. Generally, after I'm done painting, I take some isopropyl alcohol and soak the brush in it, and then I drag it across a paper towel, making sure that the paint comes out of that particular area near the ferrule, but it also dissolves any paint still stuck to other parts of the bristles. Now, of course, alcohol isn't the best thing for natural hair bristles, so I then rinse the brush in some water and take my master's brush soap and start wiping it like this. And then I also drag it in a line so I can mechanically get rid of any leftover dry paint that might still be stuck near the ferrule. I then rinse the brush thoroughly once again, dry it off and make sure the brush tip is formed. Now and then I will soak the brush in soap a second time and leave it like this, stored upside down, so the soap can dissolve any paint within the brush in areas that I couldn't properly reach, and then I wash it out the next day. This way you can enjoy your expensive brushes for a long time. So now that you know everything about brushes, there's one thing left to do, and that's to pick up some paints. Because obviously you cannot just paint minis with water. Which paint range is the best for you? Before you spend tons of money on something that won't help you, you should watch this video next to avoid the pitfalls a lot of new painters stumble into while purchasing their first paints. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.